Have you ever ignored that burning feeling in your chest, telling yourself it's probably just indigestion? Or maybe you've been clearing your throat every morning, waking up with a hoarse voice, or dealing with a stubborn cough that seems to get worse after dinner. What if I told you these symptoms might not be coming from your throat, or even your lungs? What if they're early warning signs that your esophagus is being irritated every single day, often without you realizing it? Here's what makes this even more concerning. I've seen people spend months, even years, treating allergies, chronic coughs, and throat problems, only to discover the real cause was hiding somewhere completely unexpected. Let me tell you about one woman I'll never forget. For nearly 2 years, she lived with a cough that refused to go away. It wasn't the kind of cough you get with a cold, and it wasn't caused by an infection. Almost every evening it would return, becoming worse after dinner and often waking her in the middle of the night. She tried cough syrups, allergy medications. She visited lung specialists. She even had chest x-rays that showed everything looked perfectly normal. Despite all those appointments and tests, nothing explained why she kept coughing. Then, during one visit, she was asked a question no one had thought to ask before. Do you ever feel burning in your chest after eating, or notice a sour taste in your mouth? She hesitated for a moment. Sometimes she replied, but I never thought those symptoms had anything to do with my cough. That single conversation completely changed the direction of her treatment. A few weeks later, she was finally sleeping through the night again. The constant coughing that had become part of her daily life slowly disappeared, not because someone found a better cough medicine, but because they uncovered the real problem. And that's something many older adults don't realize. Most people think acid reflux always feels like heartburn. But surprisingly, some people experience very little burning at all. Instead, the first warning signs may appear as a persistent cough, frequent throat clearing, a hoarse voice, or the feeling that something is stuck in the throat. That's one reason acid reflux is often overlooked, until it has been silently irritating the esophagus for months or even years. In today's video, I'll explain why acid leaves the stomach in the first place, the common after-dinner habit that may be making reflux worse, and the simple morning drink that may help support a healthier digestive system when combined with the right lifestyle changes. But before we talk about what you should drink, you need to understand why this problem becomes so much more common after the age of 60. Because once you understand the tiny muscle responsible for keeping stomach acid where it belongs, everything else, including your symptoms, will suddenly start to make sense. In the next part, I'll show you the hidden gatekeeper inside your digestive system that quietly protects your esophagus every day, and why, as we grow older, it may stop doing its job as well as it once did. Spend months, even years, treating allergies, chronic coughs, and throat problems, only to discover the real cause was hiding somewhere completely unexpected. Let me tell you about one woman I'll never forget. For nearly 2 years, she lived with a cough that refused to go away. It wasn't the kind of cough you get with a cold, and it wasn't caused by an infection. Almost every evening it would return, becoming worse after dinner and often waking her in the middle of the night. She tried cough syrups, allergy medications, she visited lung specialists, she even had chest x-rays that showed everything looked perfectly normal. Despite all those appointments and tests, nothing explained why she kept coughing. Then, during one visit, she was asked a question no one had thought to ask before. Do you ever feel burning in your chest after eating, or notice a sour taste in your mouth? She hesitated for a moment. Sometimes she replied, but I never thought those symptoms had anything to do with my cough. That single conversation completely changed the direction of her treatment. A few weeks later, she was finally sleeping through the night again. The constant coughing that had become part of her daily life slowly disappeared, not because someone found a better cough medicine, but because they uncovered the real problem. And that's something many older adults don't realize. Most people think acid reflux always feels like heartburn, but surprisingly, some people experience very little burning at all. Instead, the first warning signs may appear as a persistent cough, frequent throat clearing, a hoarse voice, or the feeling that something is stuck in the throat. That's one reason acid reflux is often overlooked until it has been silently irritating the esophagus for months or even years. In today's video, I'll explain why acid leaves the stomach in the first place, the common after-dinner habit that may be making reflux worse, and the simple morning drink that may help support a healthier digestive system when combined with the right lifestyle changes. But before we talk about what you should drink, you need to understand why this problem becomes so much more common after the age of 60. Because once you understand the tiny muscle responsible for keeping stomach acid where it belongs, everything else, including your symptoms, will suddenly start to make sense. Now let's go back to the woman I mentioned earlier. For almost 2 years, she believed her cough was a problem with her throat or lungs. But every single night, something was happening inside her body that she couldn't see or feel. A tiny gate that had protected her for decades was no longer closing the way it should. Here's what I mean. Imagine the entrance to your stomach has a small security gate. Every time you swallow, that gate opens for just a moment, allowing food to pass into your stomach. Then, it closes tightly, keeping powerful stomach acid exactly where it belongs. Most of us never think about this gate because, when it's working properly, it does its job silently. Doctors call this gate the lower esophageal sphincter, or LES. You don't need to remember the name. Just remember its purpose. It acts like a one-way door, letting food go down while preventing acid from coming back up. So what happens when that door begins to weaken? Instead of sealing completely, it leaves a tiny opening. It may seem insignificant, but even a small gap is enough for stomach acid to escape into the esophagus, where it doesn't belong. One of my older patients described it in a way I've never forgotten. She smiled and said, "Doctor, it's like the latch on my front gate doesn't click anymore." I couldn't have explained it better myself. A gate doesn't have to swing wide open to create a problem. If it doesn't latch properly, things slowly slip through. The same thing happens with acid reflux. The valve doesn't suddenly stop working overnight. It gradually becomes less effective over time. And that's exactly what was happening inside the body of the woman from our story. Night, after dinner, tiny amounts of stomach acid were slipping past that weakened valve while she slept. She couldn't feel the valve opening, but her throat certainly felt the effects by morning. You might be wondering, why does this seem to happen more often after the age of 60? The surprising answer is that your stomach isn't necessarily producing more acid than it did years ago. The bigger problem is that the valve keeping that acid in place may not be as strong as it once was. Like the muscles in our arms and legs, this tiny ring of muscle naturally loses some strength with age. In some people, a condition called a hiatal hernia can also make it harder for the valve to stay tightly closed. But aging isn't the only reason. There are several everyday habits that quietly put extra pressure on this little gate, and one of them is something millions of older adults do every evening without giving it a second thought. So far, we've discovered that acid reflux often begins with a tiny valve that no longer seals as tightly as it once did. But here's where things become even more surprising. Most people assume the acid stops in the esophagus. That's why they expect heartburn. But what if it doesn't? What if, while you're asleep, that acid quietly travels even higher? That's exactly what was happening to the woman I told you about earlier. Every night after dinner, she would lie down to sleep. During the day, gravity naturally helps keep stomach acid where it belongs. But once we lie flat, gravity is no longer helping, and if that little valve isn't closing properly, acid has a much easier path upward. She never felt it happening. She never woke up thinking, acid is reaching my throat. But by morning, her body had already been dealing with the consequences. Her throat felt raw, the coughing returned, and she started another day believing the problem was in her lungs. Does that sound familiar? Have you been waking up with a sore throat even though you don't have a cold? Do you find yourself constantly clearing your throat? Has your voice become hoarse by the end of the day? Or maybe you've developed a dry cough that seems to get worse after dinner or while lying in bed. If so, you're certainly not alone. For many people, the problem isn't starting in the throat at all. Doctors often call this silent reflux or laryngopharyngeal reflux because the symptoms appear in the throat instead of the chest. Unlike your stomach, the delicate tissues of your throat and voice box have very little protection against stomach acid. Imagine putting a few drops of lemon juice on a small paper cut. It stings almost instantly because that tissue wasn't designed to handle acid. Now imagine exposing the delicate tissues of your throat to tiny amounts of stomach acid night after night, week after week, sometimes for years. Even though the amount of acid may be small, the repeated irritation gradually leads to inflammation. That's why your body starts coughing. That cough isn't your body working against you, it's your body's attempt to protect your throat. In some people, the irritation can also trigger tiny spasms around the airway. That's one reason some people suddenly wake up coughing or gasping during the night. Others notice their asthma symptoms seem worse, even though nothing else has changed. Some people are surprised to learn that reflux doesn't only affect the digestive system. In certain individuals, it may also contribute to disturbed sleep or make nighttime breathing problems feel worse. While reflux isn't responsible for every nighttime breathing issue, it's a connection that's worth discussing with your healthcare provider if these symptoms sound familiar. Now think back to the woman whose cough lasted nearly 2 years. She wasn't coughing because her lungs were diseased. She wasn't fighting an infection. Night after night, her throat was simply reacting to stomach acid that had quietly escaped while she slept. Once the reflux was properly addressed, the irritation gradually settled down, and for the first time in a long time, she was finally able to sleep through the night without being awakened by coughing. So, this brings us to an important question. If reflux tends to become worse when you're lying down, is there anything you can start doing tonight to reduce those nighttime episodes? The answer is yes. In fact, one of the most effective changes has nothing to do with medication. And it's something you can begin before you go to bed tonight. The nighttime habit that can make a bigger difference than you think now. Let's answer the question we've been building toward. If acid reflux often becomes worse while you're lying down, what's one of the simplest things you can do tonight to help reduce those nighttime episodes? Surprisingly, it isn't a medication. It's giving your stomach enough time to empty before you go to bed. Think back to that tiny gate we talked about earlier. If your stomach is still full when you lie down, there's more pressure pushing against that weakened valve. And with gravity no longer helping, stomach acid has a much easier path upward. That's why one of the most helpful habits for many people is to finish eating at least 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. It sounds almost too simple. But for many people, this single change noticeably reduces nighttime reflux. Now, if you're someone who enjoys a late-night snack while watching television or has dinner just before going to bed, don't worry, you don't have to be perfect overnight. Even moving your evening meal a little earlier can be a step in the right direction. There's another habit that can make an even bigger difference while you're sleeping. Instead of lying completely flat, try raising the head of your bed by about 6 to 8 inches using bed risers or a wedge pillow. Notice I said raise your bed, not simply add more pillows. Many people stack 2 or 3 pillows under their head, hoping it will solve the problem. Unfortunately, that usually bends the neck instead of lifting the upper body. Stomach acid can still travel upward, and for some people, the position may even make reflux feel worse. A gentle incline that lifts your upper body from the waist up works much better because it allows gravity to keep helping you throughout the night. Another simple change is paying attention to how much you eat in the evening. Many people assume it's only certain foods that trigger reflux, but sometimes the amount of food matters just as much. A very large meal stretches the stomach, increasing pressure on that tiny valve we discussed earlier. The more pressure against the valve, the easier it becomes for acid to escape. For that reason, smaller evening meals are often easier for the stomach to handle than one heavy dinner. You may also notice that certain foods seem to trigger your symptoms more than others. Common culprits include fatty or fried foods, chocolate, peppermint, spicy meals, tomatoes, citrus fruits, coffee, and alcohol. The important thing to remember is that not everyone reacts to the same foods. Instead of eliminating everything at once, try paying attention to which foods consistently make your symptoms worse. Keeping a simple food and symptom diary for a couple of weeks can often reveal patterns you hadn't noticed before. And there's one more habit that many people overlook: a short walk after dinner. Even a gentle 10 to 15-minute walk may help support digestion for some people and encourages you to remain upright instead of lying down immediately after eating. Small changes like these may not seem dramatic on their own, but when several of them are combined, they can significantly reduce the amount of acid reaching your esophagus and throat. Now you might be wondering, where does that morning drink fit into all of this? That's exactly what we'll explore next. Because while no drink can cure acid reflux on its own, one simple morning choice may help soothe irritation and support your digestive health when combined with the habits you've just learned. The warning your body has been trying to give you before we finish, I want you to think about the woman whose story began this video. For almost 2 years, she believed she had a stubborn throat problem. She bought cough medicines, she tried allergy treatments, she visited specialist after specialist, hoping someone would finally explain why the coughing wouldn't stop. But the answer had been quietly hiding somewhere else all along. It wasn't her lungs. It wasn't her throat. It was a small valve that had gradually stopped doing its job, allowing stomach acid to travel where it never belonged. Once she understood the real cause, everything changed. She adjusted the timing of her evening meals. She stopped lying down too soon after dinner. She raised the head of her bed and began following the treatment plan recommended by her doctor. Little by little, the irritation settled down. The coughing became less frequent. Her mornings became more comfortable. And for the first time in a long while, she was able to sleep through the night without waking up because of her cough. That's why I wanted to tell you her story. Because acid reflux isn't always as obvious as people think. Sometimes it announces itself with heartburn, but other times it quietly disguises itself as a sore throat, a hoarse voice, constant throat clearing, or a cough that never seems to have an explanation. Those small symptoms may seem unrelated, but together they can be your body's way of telling you that something deeper deserves attention. The encouraging news is that many people are able to improve their symptoms by combining healthy daily habits with the treatment plan recommended by their healthcare provider. Simple changes like avoiding large meals late in the evening, giving your stomach time to empty before bed, sleeping with your upper body slightly elevated when appropriate, identifying your personal trigger foods, and using supportive strategies like the morning drink we discussed may all play an important role in managing reflux. At the same time, it's important to recognize when reflux needs medical attention. If you ever experience difficulty swallowing, food feeling like it's getting stuck, unexplained weight loss, vomiting blood, black stools, or severe chest pain, don't try to manage those symptoms on your own. Seek prompt medical evaluation so the underlying cause can be identified and treated appropriately. Your body rarely goes from healthy to seriously ill overnight. More often, it whispers first. A little burning after dinner. A cough that appears every evening. A voice that sounds tired by the end of the day. A restless night's sleep that keeps repeating itself. The sooner you recognize those whispers, the sooner you can begin addressing the real cause instead of simply treating the symptoms. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a symptom that you later discovered was caused by acid reflux? Or which tip from today's video are you planning to try first? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might help someone else realize they're not alone. And if you enjoy clear, evidence-based health information designed especially for adults over 60, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. In our next video, we'll talk about another health issue that often develops quietly with age, the early warning signs of declining kidney function that many people miss until the condition has already progressed. Until then, take care of yourself. Listen to what your body is trying to tell you, and I'll see you in the next video.